Hello, my name is Austin Lanier, and I'm presenting this presentation on the nature of ethno-political conflict in Myanmar. Specifically, we're going to focus on the Rohingya controversy and what the historical basis for this conflict has been, sort of where the conflict is out now, and what the international community can do to aid in a quicker completion of the conflict and to aid the Rohingya people. A brief introduction about what this presentation is going to entail. We're going to analyze the nature of ethno-political conflict in Myanmar and how this relates to ethnic conflict on a global scale. It should be noted that Myanmar's ethnic minorities have long felt marginalized and discriminated against. As we'll learn later in the presentation, this is even on a constitutional basis, and this has led to a lot of infighting against the central government. Again, we're going to focus mostly on the Rohingya minority in this presentation. If we were to use Blazevic's list, we could assign two characteristics to the nature of this conflict right off the bat. The first would be primordial. A lot of this conflict is very historical, with Southwick citing this conflict began as far back as the 9th century in relation to the Rohingya Muslim people, the Rohingya people being Islamic in faith versus the Buddhist minority people that are Bamar or the Burmese people. Secondly, one could ascribe the institutional approach, given that the Bamar people or the Burmese people were favored by their colonial rulers and were sort of given the reins of power when the colonial rulers left Myanmar, which of course led to the drafting of a constitution that does not include the Rohingya people as people under the constitution as citizens. They don't have a citizen status under the current constitution. The ethnic violence and international reaction. It should be noted right off the bat, it's very hard to determine with any level of highly accurate, any level of certainty what actually happens inside the borders of Myanmar. It's a very secretive state, it's unwelcoming to outsiders, and all the media in the state is controlled by the government, which is authoritative in nature. This has been speculated to increase violence by tightly controlling the narrative in which the people there understand the conflict and what is actually transpiring. The international reaction has been slow and has had a very marginal effect on limiting the scale of violence. This conflict was not routinely reported on until very recently. The Rohingya people have been persecuted for centuries for their adherence to the Islamic faith and their differing ethnic identity. They are denied citizenship by Myanmar constitutionally, which complicates efforts to resettle or help the Rohingya people leave Myanmar. I believe that this was done intentionally, as there are many ethnic groups in Myanmar, but none are so singled out and so left out as Rohingya people. Additionally, Doctors Without Borders, the largest healthcare provider in Myanmar for the Rohingya peoples, was forced to leave the country in 2014 when they were found to be giving aid to injured Rohingyas that had been injured in a clash with the government. The government to this day denies that such an event transpired and has offered no comment as to why they made Doctors Without Borders leave. Besides the aforementioned reasons of the historical basis, the religious and ethnic differences, I believe it serves as the conflict serves as an invaluable distraction from the movements of the highly repressive regime in Myanmar. In other words, the government and those in power have a vested interest in ensuring they remain in power. By othering the Rohingya people, this allows a buildup of centralized authority by the government, which in turn can repress political freedoms and justify doing so by claiming they are maintaining stability and that is being threatened by the Rohingya people. Globally, the plight of the Rohingya people is significant because of the larger implication of a stateless people seeking asylum. It's very rare that we hear of stateless people. Most people come from somewhere and have some legal basis to seek asylum. This, of course, is very different for the Rohingya people who don't have a state or a constitutional basis. This has created conflict for neighbor states, namely Bangladesh, who have tried to aid these people and allow them to immigrate, but are having a difficult time ascertaining people's ages, where people come from, the legality of people to work, and so on. It matters because this is one of the best current examples of a truly ethnic-based conflict. It's a complex situation and allows for in-depth study on the origins of ethnic conflict and how ethnic conflict should be dealt with on a policy basis. This is also a valuable lesson in the dangers of othering and how even in a modern and connected world, a repressive regime can still create an environment in which facts cannot penetrate into the average citizen's minds and no real change can be effected. There is some things being done now to aid the Rohingya people. To address the problem, many states have and international organizations have stepped in. The nation of Bangladesh, which has a border with Myanmar, has taken a lot of refugees in, and with help from the United Nations, has issued temporary identification documents, allowing many of these people to work and to support themselves. Additionally, the international community has placed real scrutiny as well as economic sanctions on the government and its leaders to hopefully bring about a stop to the conflict. The United Nations released a report calling the actions of the government genocidal in intent, and several prominent officials from around the world have called for Aung San Suu Kyi to be stripped from her Nobel Peace Prize that she was received in 1991. It should be noted, however, that this will not happen, as the Nobel Committee says they do not remove prizes, and it is up to the laureate themselves to maintain their image post winning the document. The international community should continue to double down its efforts to bring a swift end to the conflict while continuing to aid the Rohingya people. They should increase economic pressures on the Myanmar government and continue the campaign to ostracize the government in international arenas. This is a really effective tool because if they can control and limit the economic practices of the government, perhaps that would break through to the people and some change could be effected inside the borders of Myanmar. If you want to know a little more about the conflict, there is a wonderful documentary called The Hidden Genocide. It was produced by Al Jazeera. This documentary is very informative. It goes into good detail about the conflict, but do note it's graphic in its imagery and can be difficult to watch, which is why more of that information was not included in this presentation. But it is definitely something worth watching if this seems interesting to you, or if you would like to know more in depth about the specifics of the conflict.